165, Georgetown, Louisiana. Most famous speed trap that I know of. Made it through successfully. Going to Lafayette today to work with my friend Max. See my friends Allison and Brandon, and going to Lake Charles a couple days to work with the campus ministry on a consultation. But I've got something else I want to talk about. Sin isn't a motivation, but it's a condition. In the story of Zacchaeus, Luke chapter 19, 1 through 10, see Zacchaeus, a man excited about Jesus, does some pretty wild things to meet him. Jesus sees him, recognizes him, and says, I'm going to your house today. There's a little kid's song that we sing about it. But in this story of Zacchaeus, you really see a three-part story of conversion in the Gospels. That someone is seeking Jesus, that someone sees Jesus, and somebody finds salvation in Jesus. But a lot of the story of Zacchaeus is really a story about sin and what happens with sin and how we deal with sin. Like I said earlier, that sin's not a motivation, sin's a condition. So many times we think of sin just being this motivation. But until we meet Jesus, until we have that, and I'm not scared of the word salvation, until we have that salvific experience, sin, it is a condition. That we as humans are part of this sinful action. And that once we realize that what Jesus offers us is the power to overcome the state of sin's ruling nature in our life, then we have to realize that as Christians, that sometimes then sin does become an action that we take part in. Now, I'm a Wesleyan. I'm a United Methodist. And so much of the reason I became, as an adult United Methodist, was John Wesley, the founder of this revival movement that turned into a denomination, was his idea of how sin lives and deals in the hearts of the Christians. And his fancy word for that was entire sanctification. But Wesley, in one of his sermons, begins talking about the definition of sin in the life of a Christian. And the definition that he gives us is that it's willful sin. That willful sin is a known transgression of a known law of God, so that the Christian knows good and well what they are up to, and they're willfully deciding to then participate in that sin. So when you read the book of 1 Peter, and when you talk about don't sin, don't sin, don't sin, and so many times it seems like that it is impossible for us to, how do we not sin? And that way, if we live and work in that realm, what's happening is that we're saying that Jesus does not have the power to overcome sin as a condition that stretched across the human race. That instead, what's going on in our lives as Christians is that we are willfully deciding to sin. But in the same sermon, what Wesley talks about is how sin functions as a willful agency in our life, and that the process to not sin is actually significantly more graceful and more Holy Spirit led in our lives than we believe it to be. And he talks about this as the idea that sin can come, that we realize this, that we decide not to participate in it. And at that point, that we can reject willful sin in our life. And the problem comes, though, only when we feel the Spirit's promptings in our heart. We decide and choose to not listen to it. Then it prompts us again. We still begin to think about it. We might begin to think about how we can commit this sin. The Holy Spirit pours itself and convicts our heart. There's multiple exit points in which we decide to not sin and to not participate in this brokenness that Jesus has already freed us from. So, little nerdy thoughts, little deep thoughts, but a little important thoughts in order for us to really, you hate to say, have a bigger idea or a bigger picture of what sin is. But if we don't take it and think about it seriously enough, we're going to kind of always struggle to deal with it and to not have it present in our lives. So, a little bit on sin today.